Ladies and gentlemen, the panel discussion, the participants in the panel discussion are Dr. Joycelyn Rampersad, Mr. Alfred Waif, and Professor Theodore Lewis. Dr. Joycelyn Rampersad has been an educator for more than 40 years. She has been teacher and administrator at both secondary and tertiary levels. She is a former lecturer in science education and health and family life education at the School of Education, Faculty of Humanities and Education, the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. She has also served as a Deputy Dean of the faculty with responsibility for planning and programming. Dr. Rampersad has facilitated both nationally and regionally professional development initiatives from stakeholders at all levels of the education system. This includes the preparation of curriculum facilitators and other stakeholders for monitoring and supporting HFLE in both the formal and informal education sectors. She has been one of the architects responsible for the CARICOM-initiated Health and Family Life Education Regional Curriculum Framework. Dr. Rampersad has published in peer-referred journals regionally and internationally. She is the co-author of 2 books on developing portfolios for teaching, learning, and assessment, and is the author of the chapter, Health and Family Life in the Formal Education Sector in the Caribbean, a Historical Perspective, in the Randall UNESCO publication known as Challenging HIV/AIDS, A New Role for Caribbean Education. Dr. Rampersad.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. I just plan to chat with you a little bit on the issue of parent involvement in education today. A lot of what I had planned to say has already been said, so nevertheless, I will move ahead. The focus of my little discussion with you is on how and why we need to have parents involved in the education of their children. So my outline is as follows. Why? What does the research say? Why is this so important? What are the challenges to parental participation in the education of their children? The school and the home. What role does the school play? What role should the home play? And how, in spite of these challenges, how do we move forward? Just to get us into the boundaries that I have set, I have used these 2 definitions for my presentation. I'm looking at parenting as the process of promoting and supporting the physical, emotional, social, and intellectual development of a child. And I want to emphasize the emotional and the social here, because very often when we think of parental involvement in education, we tend to focus on the academic. And I am saying that it has to be a holistic approach, and we cannot move forward unless we take note of the emotional and the social along with the intellectual. And then I'm looking at parental involvement in education as involving parents' behaviors at home and in school settings. So I'm looking at this involvement as a dynamic that involves the school as well as the home, and that these behaviors support their children's educational progress. Now, what does the research say? I'm just going to go through this very quickly. The research says that involved parents are the hidden resource in children's education. We take it for granted, but in fact, if parents are involved, that is a resource because they bring to the table a lot of what they have in the home. Involved parents learn firsthand about daily activities and the social culture of the school. Parental involvement is a motivating factor in children's education, and involved parents serve as role models. That is, they can model the values, the social culture, and responsible behaviors so that their children in turn could learn from this. The research also says that parental involvement sends a message to the child that education is important. A home environment, therefore, that encourages learning is even more important than parents' income, educational level, or cultural background. So I think that this was said this morning, yes, that as long as that home environment encourages learning, so that I am going to be supporting you all the way, you can do this, your education is important, that this goes beyond parents' income or education level or cultural background. Also, involved parents play a vital role in the social and emotional development of a child. The child begins that early emotional and social development in the house, in the home. And therefore, it is there that foundation is laid, and then this moves into the school. So, it is important, therefore, for us to understand about that social and emotional role and how that starts in the home. And parental involvement is a two-way process. You need to have parental commitment, but you also need to have teacher commitment. Without the teacher commitment, then there is no real parental involvement. So what are some of the challenges? The first challenge I want to look at is the power differential. There is a power differential between the school and between parents. There is no equity or equality, however we want to look at it. So the presumption of equality between parents and schools does not exist. I have heard my colleagues say, the kind of parents that we have to deal with, or the kind of children that we have to deal with. And immediately it's like them and us. And there is a power differential there. So they don't see themselves at all as partners in this educative process. And parents are key stakeholders, and we have to understand and recognize that there are key stakeholders, and we cannot afford to just shift them to the side. Historically, parents in general, and particularly low-income parents, have limited participation in roles that count in decision-making and policy implementation in schools. We welcome them for the fundraising events. When we need to have a new building, we need to have perhaps new initiatives and so on. We welcome them to do those things. But there seems to be some understanding that you do not know about education, that we know about education, and therefore your views don't really count in decision-making and in policy implementation. So as a result, parents' opportunities to understand school culture, the structures of the school, and the functions, their roles and responsibilities, all of these things have been restricted. What about our local context? Traditionally, here in Trinidad and Tobago, parents have not been able or have not been allowed to meaningfully partner with schools. First of all, there is that narrow interpretation by some administrators of their own roles and responsibilities, and that has served really to exclude the parents from the decision-making process. So although this is global, it is also very, very real locally. And there have been some things that have happened along the way that really has truly made the situation even worse. The first has been the expansion in school size. Now, we have seen schools expanding and buildings. We have seen the school curriculum. And this has brought a sense of intimidation to many parents. They don't seem to be able to navigate or enter the school without some kind of trepidation. They have to negotiate the security. They have to negotiate the visitation policies and those kinds of things. And schools are generally not welcoming. The second is the emergence of this successful school. I don't want to call it by the name that we use normally. So that this emergence of the successful school has seen a general movement out of the community by parents to where these schools are located. And so because you've had this movement, this has resulted in a literal as well as a figurative distance between parents and the schools, so that the parents are not even located physically in the communities around the schools. So these are two of the challenges. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we overcome these challenges? Well, I am suggesting that the ability of parents to actively participate in the affairs of school correlates highly with parents' social capital. Now, this was mentioned earlier this morning, and this is the sum total of all the skills and knowledge that you will require to negotiate the system so that there is some benefit to you. Coleman in 1988 explains that social capital that includes relational trust, norms and sanctions, that is understanding the rules of the system, and also information channels. I just want to briefly run through that very quickly. The first one is trust, which is part of building the social capital. Many parents may not have that relational trust with parents and teachers, or even with each other. And so this may hinder any attempt at building a school community or obtaining productive teacher-parent interactions. So that trust in the social environment and in the actors is an essential component of social capital. So that we need to really, in schools, create conditions that build trust. How can I relate to the principal? How can I relate to the teachers? And that relational trust is very important. Parents also need to understand the explicit as well as the implicit norms of the school, the entire school culture. What are the rules and expectations? If I don't know what these are, then I'm unable to make a decision, or I'm able to look at what is right for my child or what is not right for my child. Awareness and understanding of the formal as well as the informal norms of the school system by parents will reduce that intimidation and facilitate the ability to easily negotiate the school environment. Now, there are some schools that from the time you enter the school premises, you know what is the culture, what is the ethos of that school. So there are schools that I go to, and a student might meet me by the gate and greet me, "How may I help you?" And they may take me to the office or wherever, and immediately I can get a sense of how that school operates, what is important, and how they value the visitors that come to the school, including parents, because the child may not have known if I was a parent or not. And then I've also been to schools where students rush past me. I have to stand carefully before I fall, and even teachers will look at me and pass me by, and I have to wonder and probably ask somebody eventually, where could I find the office or something like that. So the informal norms come out very easily when you first enter the school. But parents need to know this, and they need to negotiate this, and we have to determine how do we get parents to really understand the norms of the school and also the sanctions, what I need to do, what I should not do, and things like that. Indeed, parents may need to be educated about these norms. It's not something that they could just catch, all right? About the rules, about the expectations of the school system. What are the norms, for example, for active participation and collaboration in the range of educational, social, and religious activities provided by the school? How can I participate? How do I enter? How do I become a part of this? And they also have to be educated about their own roles and responsibilities as parents. So it works both ways. We also have to include information channels, because communication is important, and that's part of the process. So that these channels are necessary for communicating between school and parents, as well as among parents themselves. So that parents need to have a skill set to be able to access and to use a range of communication strategies. We heard earlier this morning that some parents are not able to come to the school when they are needed. Or sometimes I am told that the parents we want to see, those are not the ones who come. The ones who come are not the ones that we want to see. But sometimes they just can't come because coming may impact on their livelihood. on their living. They may have to take time off from a job. So how do we help them to use a range of communication strategies? So we're going to have to come to that. We're living in a digital age, and perhaps we have to move away from the norm. In the past, we have seen that parent-teacher associations didn't always work in the way that we expected them to work, so perhaps we need to have a new way of looking at communicating with parents and getting parents on board. Also, when we use a range of communication skills, it might be face-to-face, it might be digital, whatever we choose to do, we will be at the same time enhancing interpersonal relationships among parents, and this is building a social skill set, all right? And also between parents and teachers. And we also provide opportunities for knowledge exchange. And this is important because these opportunities for knowledge exchange lead to what we call intellectual capital, where we are building knowledge in a community of learners. I also want to touch on the fact that we need to look at the social and emotional development of parents as well as children. Less emphasis is placed on parental involvement and the social and emotional domains of children's development. Now, there are some parents who are able to do this fairly well in their homes, but there are some parents who just don't have the capacity. And so what we are finding is that the children come into schools and they lack certain core skills that will allow them to relate with each other and relate with their teachers and so on. So that because parents and families influence the social and emotional behavior of children, we have behavioral problems and social dysfunction having immediate consequences for classroom environment and also for teachers' instructional efforts. So they come in, they don't know how to behave, they don't know how to relate in the classrooms, they don't know how to form relationships, they don't know how to build friendships. They are very aggressive because they don't have any emotional intelligence. They don't recognize early o'clock the triggers that allow them to behave in certain ways. They come in with this anger, all right, the aggression. They want to fight, but that's what they know. And the lack of the social and emotional skills and the behavioral problems as a result have immediate consequences to a classroom environment. The classroom environment is very important if teaching and learning is to take place. And the school has a responsibility, therefore, that is the teaching of social and emotional learning. It cannot be something that is just pushed to the side. When I speak to teachers, they tell me about having to cover the syllabus. And then I said, what about health and family life education? Oh, we don't have time for that because it is not examined. And they push it aside. But this is one of the areas where you are able to begin to teach the social and emotional learning skills, the life skill competencies, and we spoke about all those life skills, including decision-making, critical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, intra- and interpersonal relationship skills, coping skills, all of those various things that in my day perhaps we used to catch it because I was at home with an extended family and they would have me role play those kinds of things. How will you behave in so-and-so situation? And I had to show them. Show me how you will scream if somebody tried to do so-and-so, and I had to role play it. So it was caught because we had that kind of support in those days. But nowadays, we don't have that. We also have very young parents who don't know any better, all right? So that we have the responsibilities to start to inculcate those kinds of competencies from early childhood. It starts in the home, but in the school, we can continue to build it. And we also have responsibilities to help parents to develop those kinds of skill sets, all right? So I am suggesting that one way we can do this is through the teaching of these social and emotional competencies and integrating the HFLE across the curriculum. Every teacher should be a teacher of health and family life education. Every teacher should be able to model and teach all of the life skills that are so very important to help us negotiate the task of daily living. Because these skills are skills for life. And when we leave school, we still have to continue with these skills. We also have to look at parenting capacity and the social and emotional development of children. We need to recognize that there are deficits, perhaps, in parents. I don't like to use the deficit model, but for want of a better word. We have issues such as migration, parents who choose to leave and go abroad, and these are the ones who will be sending back the barrels that we have to go and get all the brands and so on in. We have incarceration, that was mentioned earlier this morning, so the parent is absent. We have drug addiction, that is a very important issue. We have poverty. We have levels of education. We have violence in the home. We have the types of familial relationships. We have abandonment, all of these kinds of things, especially when we speak to the urban fringe. All of these things can impact the social interactions in the home and, by extension, the social and emotional development of children. So sometimes we just have social rejection. All right? So this will impact on the attitude to involvement or the ability to become involved in the child's education. The parents just don't have the skill sets. They don't know how to do it. So they don't know how to become involved, and they have a negative attitude to involvement, as we saw this morning, when they won't even send their children to homework centers. So there are also implications here for children's overall health and well-being and their learning potential. Because if we have all of these social dysfunctions, very often it impacts on mental health and other kinds of health issues. And sometimes these manifest themselves in other kinds of physical manifestations. So you have the children's overall health and well-being, and this interrupts the learning potential. If you are not healthy, then you cannot learn. If you have issues in the home, then you cannot learn. So a hungry child is not able to learn. A child who is ravaged by hunger and sexual exploitation and abuse and so on is not able to learn. So therefore, I am suggesting that schools need to bridge the gap, and that we need to do this through parental education and the kinds of support services that will help the parents to develop these kinds of competencies. Not too long ago, a minister of education here said that the country is suffering from a crisis in parenting. And he suggested, parents, please remember that without your commitment to your children's education and personal development, and I was so happy to see this, our society is in danger of losing even more of our young people to crime and violence. I wouldn't touch on this because this was mentioned before. So I'm going to say, what are some strategies for moving forward? Well, this came out earlier, and I am repeating a lot of what came out in the discussions this morning. We need to have training programs and workshops to build capacity in parents. And the schools have a responsibility to help with this, as well as the community, so that we need to make sure that certain kinds of core skills are developed in parents. Immediately come to mind the skill of parenting. We think that this is a given, but I have had to negotiate parenting. It's not the same as when I was a child growing up. And you learn by trial and error. There is no manual you can go to say this is how you do it, because every child is different and every context is different. And so that we have to teach the skills of parenting, especially when we have parents who are not much older than their children. We have to teach skills like literacy. All right, we have to teach skills like health and nutrition so that we can have children come into school who, in fact, have the correct kind of nutrition to be able to develop their cognitive abilities. We need to have parent-friendly schools so that there's a role for teachers and the administrators. If we really want to encourage our parents to partner with us in the education system, then teachers must understand that parents have rights and that they need to put policies in place for dealing with the parents. And administrators themselves must know that, hey, these are our key stakeholders. These are very important persons, and we need to welcome them, and we need to see how we can help them to partner with us. So they have to make it easier for parents to participate by giving them meaningful roles in the school decision-making. And I am thinking in terms of perhaps having committees, of doing whatever it is, but different from what we are used to, because what we have been doing in the past really is not working if we can't get the parents to come to the schools. And even if we get 2 or 3 or 4 parents starting it, and then we can snowball this effect, then this is going to help. And then we have to look at formal as well as informal ways of communication. We have to draw on the power of ICT. So perhaps we need to think in terms of school blogs and podcasts and text messaging and so on, because every parent has a phone, all right? So this might be one way that we can make sure that we communicate with parents all the time, all right? We also have to make sure that we develop a sense of community among parents and teachers to create conditions in schools that build trust and facilitate the development of the social capital. That is what I spoke about earlier. That is the skill sets, the knowledge and the competencies that they need to be able to negotiate their education system, to negotiate the school environment, and to get a benefit to themselves and to their children. We need to provide opportunities for interaction, for knowledge exchange, for leadership development in our parents, and for collective action, because parents together could do a lot, all right? All of these are the important components of social and intellectual capital. So that my thesis today is that we need to really and truly develop the social and intellectual capital of our parents so that they can make a more meaningful contribution and partner with the school to get the best for their children. Thank you.